Welcome back to another Mobalytics video. Today we're covering the best champions for every role in patch 12.6. Before we get started, don't forget to check out our Mobalytics desktop app. It helps you out with runes, builds, matchups and loads more. So when trying out or learning any of these champions, it can really make the difference. Let's kick it all off, as always, with the top lane. The first top lane choice of the day is going to have to be Jax. Jax got buffed this patch and he's been having a fantastic time since those changes. Jax has never felt too weak this season, but he has been overshadowed a little bit by those other big bruisers in the top lane, especially those who can bruise Hullbreaker. Now the meta has settled down a bit though, the top lane is kind of getting back to normal, and those classic powerhouses that have always thrived there are back, and definitely Jax is among those best choices. Jax has basically always been the same champion. He hasn't really changed too much, but he's always been relevant, and when he's more than relevant, he can seem a little bit too overpowered. Jax has historically always been a quite difficult champion to balance, as one buff too many and this guy is kind of better than everyone. Jax's early trading and fighting is pretty strong. His counter strike wins him a ton of matchups and he has a really good amount of kill threat in the majority of matchups. When he gets level 6 though, he spikes significantly, and it's not actually the active part of his ultimate that gives him all those resistances, but it's the third hit bonus damage passive spike. This, when combined with Jax's W, grants him a huge amount of early burst damage, especially when he grabs himself a Sheen, which is why these Triforce Sunderer setups have always been preferred on this champion. A fed Jax can easily carry games, as I'm sure many of you have already seen in this patch. He gets ahead and he becomes unkillable in that side lane, and if no one can duel him, no one can deal with him, and it just doesn't really stop there. Jax can easily bring 2 to 3 enemies to the side lane when he's split pushing and often take them all out just on his own, especially once he's hit that core item spike of Blade of the Ruin King, Triforce and Death's Dance. Jax snowballs incredibly well, and whether it's side laning, flanking team fights or just 5v5ing, this guy is more than capable of carrying a lot of games this patch. Shen has come back into the game in full swing as we'd all expected. He goes up and down in popularity throughout every season, but he's always capable of being one of the best picks in that top lane, just due to his incredibly influential kit. Shen's ultimate is one of the best ults in the game for any top laner, especially since those teleport nerfs. The fact that his enemies always have to be aware of this huge shield and TP means if they switch off for even 1 second, he can punish them and potentially have an enormous snowball effect and impact on the entire game. Shen's ultimate is definitely his most identifiable ability, but it's not the only thing that's really strong about this champion. Shen's taunt is an impressive AoE crowd controlling ability, and can be used in tandem with his ultimate to lock down enemies when engaging or peeling for those high priority targets. There's not a lot more satisfying than landing a huge 5-man flash taunt in a teamfight. Then you've got the fact that Shen is a tanky duelist who actually fares really well in lane and in a ton of 1v1 matchups too. When Shen gets a bit fed, he genuinely deals some pretty mental damage, and for a split pushing tank with a global TP ultimate, that's a really strong trait to have. To top all of those strengths off though, he also remains a fantastic early top lane pick. He's capable of surviving rough matchups and he works into almost every single team composition in the game. If you main top lane in Season 12, this guy is Mr. Consistent, and you should have him in your champion pool for sure. Our third and final top lane pick has just got to be Riven. No surprise there. Nothing at all has changed which influences how dominant this champion is, and unless we see any of her main counter picks buffed into the stars, she's going to continue to win a ton of games for the foreseeable future. Riven has just got too much to offer right now. You've got the obvious strengths in her damage, her mobility and low cooldowns with no resource restrictions, but then you've got the fact that she feels completely unkillable with Gore Drinker and Death's Dance, and this is what makes her so hard to beat. In the past, Riven has always had her strong periods in seasons, but there are a lot of champions in the game that would just simply destroy her in the lane phase. However, right now though, she's just too good, and she can easily come out on top even in those slightly difficult matchups. Riven can stomp lanes, or she can just roam with her mobility. She can split push and take out multiple enemies at once, or she can flank teamfights and destroy your entire backline. She can also even 1v5 if she lands that big third QR combo. Riven doesn't really have too many weaknesses right now, and that's why she's just such a good pick in Season 12, and still so even in patch 12.6. Let's move on to the jungle now, and it's nice to see some new faces, although those new faces are a little bit terrifying if you're an AD carry main. First up, and you obviously know which champion is going to be picked, and it's Rengar. This champion is absolutely busted since his little rework and adjustments in patch 12.6, and he's pretty much permabanned in the majority of ranks at the moment. Rengar has always been a terrifying champion to play against, because you simply know if you come across one that knows what they're doing, you're just going to auto lose. Rengar's ability to one-shot his enemies has never been questioned. But it's the meticulous jungle pathing, the intricate combos and the consistent utilisation of his passive and his ferocity that make him so difficult that the majority of players just don't pack the same punch that those high elo players do. However, since these recent changes, he's way more forgiving, and it's no way near as important that you get everything perfectly right with every single click. Now, not only is his jungle clear easier, but so is his damage output, and his combos aren't quite as important as your Q now crits, and it does a stupid amount of damage. Now that's not to say that those Rengar one-tricks aren't still a step above everyone else, because genuinely they are. And they can take this rework and make it even stronger, maximising their new leap stack ferocity craziness and clearing that first and second clear faster than anyone else in the Rift. Either way, no matter what rank you are, if you're a Rengar one trick or not, or even if you think you are with only Mastery level 4, Rengar is pretty overpowered this patch, so play him whilst you can before he inevitably gets those nerfs. Next up, we've got the big bad bear, Volibear. This champion has steadily creeped up through the jungle tiers over the last month or so, and despite his slow approach to the god tier, he still feels like he's come out of nowhere. I mean, this guy is just a huge badass bear that looks like an absolute beast, so that's more than enough reason to play him already. But the fact that he's actually really damn strong at the moment makes it even better. One of the main reasons Volibear is just so strong is how much damage he deals and takes too whilst building like a full tank. You can build pure tanky items like Chem Tank, Force of Nature and the rest of it and still deal a crazy amount of damage. Volibear's got a super reliable stun, some great AoE damage, and then his ultimate which allows him to dive turrets so easily, and just generally help gap close to his enemies as well. The champion is actually really well designed, his basic abilities feel really smooth and link up together super well. Volibear has a surprisingly strong early to mid game. He has pretty high damage, durability, and can really push his lead and win games with it easily. I'd probably say his ultimate is one of his biggest strengths to get him snowballing though. Tower diving is a massive part of abusing leads, especially from the jungle. And this ultimate is just amazing at doing this without too much risk whatsoever. Volibear actually duels and skirmishes really well as well, so you're not going to have too many issues with those early game invading junglers as long as you get through the first few clears without being jumped on. Overall, Volibear is performing really well at all ranks at the moment, and this is definitely the best he's been for quite some time. The third and the final jungler for this patch is going to be Nocturne. Another champion that has always had his ups and downs in the meta, but his kit design is just so perfect to carry those games with. Nocturne's ultimate is one of the hardest abilities in the game to play against, especially in the lane phase. You just cannot ward against it, and it'll come in right at that point where you've overcommitted to a fight, and the next thing you know, you're dead and he's fed. A fed Nocturne is absolutely horrifying. Whether he goes full glass cannon and one-shots you every time you see him, or he can just build Bruiser and never die. Either way, it's always going to be just as terrifying when he presses R. Nocturne feels like he can always be in the fight, if he's on the way back to the map from base, if he's farming camps, or even if he's counter jungling. All he does is press his R, and he can always be where he needs to be. Nocturne is one of those champions that can really punish over aggressive players, and this patch he's having an incredible time. Over the last month his win rate is just getting higher and higher, and this is just not going to stop anytime soon. On to the mid lane now, and in the first spot we've got Ahri. Ahri has been tearing up the Rift for the majority of this season now, ever since those adjustments and changes came into her kit. We have talked a hell of a lot about this champion since she's been so good for so long, and plenty of times in these videos, so there's not much more we need to know really. Ahri is just one of the best mid laners in the game though. She's fairly blind pickable and works well into the majority of all team compositions. She's easily capable of killing her enemy throughout any lane phase, picking up early kills and snowballing very quickly, and now she fares exceptionally well throughout the game. Ahri's ultimate resets make her so slippery and so difficult to shut down now. And also now that her damage isn't all based on landing her charm, she can delete you with any of her other abilities pretty quickly. If you are a mid lane main in Season 12, you should be playing Ahri by now. Our next pick in the mid lane is Diana. Now we all know just how crazily strong this champion is at the moment, and for the majority of players that's still in the jungle, but she's actually insane in the mid lane. Before, Diana's win rate in the mid lane was pretty high, but her play rate kept it a bit quiet. But these days a lot more people are jumping on the hype train. The one thing about Diana is she has a very high ban percentage based on her success in the jungle, but if she does slip through the draft you can win a ton of games on Diana mid. Diana has some pretty nutty kill threat in lane. Her bursty trade combos are very strong and she can easily pop down a lot of champions pre-6. Then when she hits level 6 and gets that ultimate, she becomes even more threatening. Diana's ultimate is an amazing tool for duels, skirmishes, grouped fights, and of course those team fights, and if you don't have flash against her, it's really gonna hurt. Mid lane Diana does build more like a traditional burst mage too, opting for more damage rather than the Nash's Tooth you'll see in the jungle, so her abilities do pack a serious punch. Diana mid has other strengths too rather than just burst and kill potential. If her enemy roams and leaves her in the mid lane, she can demolish those turrets so quickly with her passive. She also fares really well in the side lanes for the same reason. She farms incredibly quickly, she can easily take enemy jungle camps in seconds, and obviously she's insane in teamfights. That ultimate and Zhonya's combo is just too good. The third and final pick for the mid lane is Akshan. Ever since he came along, he's been a pretty spicy pick to say the least. He just brings a ridiculous amount of things to the table. Damage, burst, poke, shields, mobility, resets, long range executions, and of course the potential to revive his entire team if he kills the right target. Yes, all of those things really are in one champion, and you can definitely feel the effect of them when you play against him. On the base of all those oppressive traits though, you've kinda just got your classic snowbally bursty assassin, and he's fairly one-dimensional when you forget all about the OP stuff that he brings along. Akshan needs to get fed, he needs to snowball, and he just needs to abuse his early game to actually be effective, and if he does get behind he can feel a bit irrelevant. But if he gets fed, which happens a lot by the way, he just wins so many games. Akshan's ability to roam around the map with his W stealth, swing into lanes with his E and pop enemies down with that insane burst damage makes him more than capable of carrying on his own. And the fact that he gets those resets and swings back to safety makes him very frustrating to beat, as he so often gets away with that reckless aggressive playstyle. Akshan has floated around between top and mid and is performing very well in both, but at the moment mid lane is his best role. Let's jump down to the bot lane now and start off with the AD carries. As you all know by now, Vayne, Jhin and Jinx have been dominating the entire season and we simply don't want to bore you by continuing to talk about them. So let's cover some of the other top options to play who are also performing really well right now. First off, we've got Xayah. Lethality Xayah has returned back to the meta and she's having a great time at all ranks. Eclipse and Muramana is a very cheeky combo, and on this champion, especially alongside Summon Aerie, it does some pretty hefty damage. Xayah brings a lot of strengths that she's always had. She's a very safe pick, she's got good range, good kiting, burst, and she's also a great pick into most team comps. Her ultimate gives her a massive amount of safety, and alongside her summoner spell, she can actually be very difficult to kill if she plays it well. Xayah with lethality just makes her that much harder to play against though, rather than the crit build. Now don't get me wrong, the crit build is still very good in a lot of games, but the lethality route is just far more consistent and a bit more reliable. Nothing beats the old Rakan Xayah combo though, it's still ridiculously strong and I actually don't really know why more people don't play it. Anyway, a QE combo from Xayah in lane with this lethality setup does some okay damage. Now it's not eye-watering, but it does add up, especially if you can push and poke your enemies often under their turret. However, when you get into the mid game, this quick and easy mid-range combo does a monstrous amount of damage, and you can send those squishies down to 20% health every time they even get close. Throughout the rest of the game, this build gives you a ton of burst, a ton of damage, and a lot of poke. And not only that, but it's a lot of fun to play with. It's pretty entertaining watching a Twitch come out of stealth ready to ruin your day, and he just gets insta-killed. Samira is next, and she's quickly becoming my favourite champion to play from that bot lane. She honestly feels like one of the most underrated champions in the game, and I personally think she's a little bit broken. Samira is currently sitting at around a 52% win rate at the moment at Plat Plus, and that's fairly impressive considering she's been almost forgotten about for a large part of this season. Samira fits into that category of champions that if you have a lack of CC against, you just cannot beat them, and if they know what they're doing, you're going to struggle to shut them down whatsoever. Master Yi and Katarina are those other similar champions that can just pentakill easily and fight consistently through those short or extended fights. Samira boasts a huge amount of mobility, healing and burst damage, and if you combine all of these together in the right team fight, you just feel unstoppable. Samira's W is also an amazing self-peeling ability. It is literally a quick AoE Yasuo win wall on top of yourself that deals damage. So yeah, it's pretty damn good. Getting good at Samira requires some pretty hard limit testing. You need to understand how much damage this champion does, as you've got to be up so close and personal to do it. But when you get the hang of it, it's absolutely worth it. Samira is a great fun champion to play, so if you're bored of those hyper carries, come join me in the Samira fan club. Lucian has had several minor buffs over the course of this season, and he's finally starting to see those results. Lucian has struggled to deal with the long range meta for a large part of Season 12, but now the meta is slowly changing a bit and becoming more aggressive in that bot lane. This is meaning Lucian is working his way back in, and he's doing those Lucian things that he just does best. Lucian has always had one of the strongest early game lane phases for any AD carry. His level 2 and level 3 all-ins are very strong, and he can snowball exceptionally quickly. Gale Force gives you another gap closer alongside your E, and the extra burst and execute potential on this item makes it very hard for your enemies to deal with you. Then of course you've also got Kraken Slayer, which works super well with Lucian's double auto attack passive and gives you a stupid amount of extra burst damage. Lucian and Nami is still one of the best bot lane pairings in the game, as it's just crazy how much damage this gives you, and there are very few other bot laners that can match this duo's early game damage output. Lucian Nami snowballs at a crazy pace, and if you die a few times early with no help from a jungle, there's no hope for you whatsoever. To conclude, Lucian may still be a bit more of a situational pick, but if you get the right draft for him, he can easily be better than any of those top tier AD carries. Finally, let's move on to the support role, and in the first place we've got Senna. Ever since those minor buffs she got near the start of Season 12, her popularity has been through the roof. And she's genuinely not stopped for 1 second since these changes happened. Senna's scaling is probably some of the best in the game. The damage and range she gets from those soul stacks makes her turn into a monster. And in the late game she can pop down those enemies from just so far away. Senna is a pretty unique support, and a really good way to bring a ton of physical damage to a team comp that may be lacking it elsewhere. Senna works beautifully with such a huge variety of bot lane champions too. You can pick AD carries, mages, bruisers, and even Tahm Kench, which is a pretty ridiculous combo even to this day. Senna just provides a huge amount of poke, harass, and sustain from that support role too. So it's not like she's useless until she gets to the late game either. Senna is a very scary pick, but does take some skill to position well enough to do her job properly. So if you enjoy this kind of scaling carry playstyle, she's going to be the support for you. Renata Glask is well and truly making her mark on the Rift at the moment after a somewhat shaky start. A lot of players thought she was useless and others thought she was just plain broken. Well, Renata is not exactly the easiest champion in the world to play, and due to her long cooldowns and semi-weak ultimate in the early game, she isn't really the best in the lane phase. But as the game goes on, her utility becomes more and more obvious, and slowly but surely she starts to feel very impactful. Renata's W revive and the buff it gives as well are incredible tools and definitely makes this champion very difficult to play against. Although Renata Glask may be a little bit weak on her own, if you put her with the right AD carry, she can be unstoppable. Renata and Samira is a really fun combo I've been playing a lot recently, so give that one a go. Trust me, it's really fun. Renata's ultimate, once it's got a few levels in it, is simply game changing. So if you do manage to get to level 16 in a game, you're going to have a really fun time. Sit in those choke points out of vision when you cast it, and you'll see just how crazy this ability can be when you use it perfectly. It is absolutely hilarious watching the enemies just implode and kill each other, and you get to walk away with 3 or 4 kills without building any damage items whatsoever. Finally, the last support and the last choice on this list is going to be Soraka, and what a season she is having. Soraka is just the queen of sustain, and although other healing supports are also doing really well too, she's just a bit better than all the rest. Soraka just offers so much relentless healing, and the fact that her ultimate cleanses anti-heal means she can completely change fights on her own. Whether it's farming assists in the bot lane, fighting those early 2v2s, or those 45-minute late game teamfights, Soraka's impact and healing output is just too huge to ignore. Soraka is incredibly fragile though, and does need a bit of practice to play her when it comes to her positioning. However, if you can play safe enough whilst also being close enough to your teammates to constantly heal them, she is just an amazing pick this patch. In a meta still heavily so full of enchanters and hypercarries, she is just brilliant at all stages of all games. If the pocket healer is your playstyle, Soraka is the pick to play. So that's going to bring us to the end of this best champions for every role in patch 12.6 video. We hope you agree with our choices, and don't forget to drop us a comment and let us know who you think is just super duper OP this patch. That's all from us here at Mobalytics. I've been your host Vale, and we'll see you in the next video. Take care.